Fred Sweet, who is a organizer of the biggest fashion film festival in San Diego, he sent me an email asking if we can show this on his film festival, and I felt very flattered, and I didn't even know there is such thing as fashion film festival. He showed in that year, and later on the next year they did a big international film award, which was in Hollywood, the red carpet, and that's when it won for the best fashion category.
Yes.
And later on, another film of mine won another awards there.
Welcome to the Fruiting Body Podcast with your host, Brendan O'Neill. Today we have a lovely guest. This is Peter RIchweisz. I'm not going to be able to pronounce it perfectly, even though he warmed us up. So we're going to jump right into this today. Peter is a director, editor, cinematographer. He is the full package. He's going to discuss with us what he's doing in Phuket, how he got here, and some interesting stuff that has been happening over the past year, especially in the industry of cinematography. So without further ado, let's get this started. Okay, Peter, thanks a lot for joining us today. And as we discussed kind of prior to the podcast, we're going to walk through your journey from university in Hungary, moving to London, to Dubai, and then over to Phuket. So let's get us started as who was young Peter in Hungary and how did you get into cinematography?
Well, I grew up in a kind of mid-sized town in Hungary. And even during the primary school, secondary school, I was the kind of artsy guy, who does, drawings and paintings. And I run the school radio, which was like an alternative music radio, playing between the breaks in the classes and stuff. I did the first exhibition in the class, in the secondary school. So I was like that guy who was always like attracted to art forms, every kind of art forms. As I said, from music, painting. Later on, this kind of transformed into art performances and more contemporary art movement. And I was a reader. I loved reading. I was kind of not the guy who necessarily fulfilled the curricula, although I was kind of okay with that. But I was like really doing serious researches at quite an early age in terms of philosophy. That was one of my main sort of point of interest, and contemporary art, and that's how I grew up in that little mid-sized town in Hungary. So age of 18, out of secondary school, straight away I moved to Budapest, and I became part of the sort of contemporary art scene there. As I said, we were doing exhibitions and, essay readings and, that kind of really nice early 90s kind of intellectual circle of Budapest.
Was this is this like a typical childhood growing up in Hungary, or were like, so I'm from Canada, and usually in Canada I would say like probably the people that go down the art route is probably less than 15%, and most people are on the athletic side, the business side. That's kind of what we're pushed towards. Yeah. What were you pushed towards, like, in your small town?
Well, I wasn't really pushed, actually. My parents were always just kind of let me do what I want to do, so they were not expecting me to be going down the path of their sort of life career and stuff. So I was just a free person. I wouldn't say it's an average upbringing in Hungary at all, because even there, normally people pick normal, jobs for career path. So I enrolled to university studying philosophy, which was kind of quite limited that time. I think there was like 15 people allowed, and 2,000 applied, or some crazy numbers and stuff. So I got accepted to this quite prestigious university, where I pretty much dedicated the 4 or 5 years of my life of, reading and researching in libraries and stuff. So my life was like couple of hours, I hang out in a university that was also quite sort of free flow and wasn't really a restricted sort of institution, although it was quite sort of prestigious.
And what was the name of this university?
ELTE.
ELTE. And so I was reading that you were going to ELTE, but did the social sciences, did that transition into the film, the art side in the same university, or did that come later?
It was actually one of the first eye-opening for me for the film. Even in my hometown, we used to go to, we had a circle of people, and we used to go to the film clubs, which was showing only art movies, from Tarkovsky's to the Godards and the Bressons and stuff. So I kind of grew up in that environment. I always had affinity for the art form of the cinema. Especially in Hungary, we had like two type of theaters. You had your Blockbusters and you had your Arthouse cinema network, and practically I haven't really even stepped into Blockbuster theaters at all. So I kind of really exclusively grew up on Arthouse cinema. So I enjoyed it. Yeah, of course, watched television, and I watched.
But how would you define like art house theater, like independent films?
Yeah.
Were they primarily Hungarian or was it international?
Well, it was pretty much international. A lot of them from that sort of Eastern Bloc. So movies I still have a bit of recollection of, but I don't even remember who made them and stuff. And like visually and content-wise, I have a recollection, but I can't even identify some of the directors anymore, because they were very sort of on the fringe, marginal kind of, from Kazakhstan and whatever. But we had the French, the Italians, the German, the whole independent kind of art house cinema, which was obviously huge from the 70s, 80s, 90s.
And how does that work growing up in Hungary? Where primarily you're just learning Hungarian and English, or are you also learning other languages naturally in Hungary, or was that more because of the film side you would try to pick those up as well?
Well, that's kind of goes in a funny way, because when I started to study philosophy on the university, we had like half a year to kind of complete our exams on philosophical readings. I was very bad with languages. That was one of the main weaknesses for me in secondary school. So I had like 6 months to basically bring myself up to the level to read philosophical text in English, and I built up a quite big vocabulary, which was quite academical and philosophic driven, with a lot of Latin terminologies and stuff like that. So it was quite funny, because when I moved to London, all of a sudden I'm in Soho, this guy who speaks like half Latin, half philosophical academic language.
With a British accent.
Not even a British accent, no, with a Hungarian accent.
Okay.
And I'm in London, and people looked at me as a freak, from some old movie or something. And with this Dracula accent, the Hungarian accent is always kind of identified as a Dracula accent, because, the first Dracula actor was Bela Lugosi, who was a Hungarian actor, moved to Hollywood in the 20s and stuff. And he just had a strong Hungarian accent, but because of that accent, later this transformed into the Dracula accent. I'm gonna suck your blood,
Okay. So this is where that derived from.
Yeah, it's kind of coming from that, and later on the other sort of actors and stuff mimicked it and became almost like a sort of tonality of a Dracula speech and stuff. So I had that sort of vocabulary with a quite strong Dracula accent. So it was quite challenging the first few months to get my messages through in Soho, London, in a bar,
to be able to communicate with these people and them to understand you.
Exactly.
And how did you make the decision to go from Hungary to London? Was that a job opportunity? What happened exactly?
No, I mean, when I was in university, I was like 100% devoted to philosophy as my career path and stuff. And somehow the bridge of accident kind of took me to, on a sort of personal reason. One day I just took my hat and I said, okay, I'm going to go to London probably for a year or two or something. I don't know.
No intentions, no goal, just kind of taking a break almost?
Yeah, it was like I didn't know what I'm going to do. Okay. The only thing I had in my hand, beside philosophy study, I used to have a girlfriend, she was a model, and somehow I got a film camera, and I started to take pictures of her. And her friends liked the photos, and I started to take a couple of like these modern portfolios. But even there, I wasn't doing like your regular kind of beauty shots and stuff. But I tried to put concepts in it, and with that, I built up some sort of portfolio of photography, still photography, and I had one small. Actually, I got a medium format camera in this process.
But with no formal training at this point, this was kind of
well, I had training because I studied aesthetics, for instance, in the university. Yeah. So I knew a lot about image making from the aesthetical point of view. Even in film, I took quite a few seminars on film aesthetics and stuff where I kind of realized, the depth of art, the film as an art form and stuff. So this sort of kind of transition from academic path to a more sort of practical thing kind of opened my eyes when I moved to London, and I realized like, philosophy was a kind of hidden unemployment scene in Hungary that time. And I realized like, I can just use the sort of artistic strategies I grew up in, and let's do this sort of fashion, advertising, photography as a kind of joke, I mean, it I thought like it was too lightweight, it was too kind of degrading my sort of so-called self-identity in a way,
Was there like a key milestone or a certain point in which this is essentially a hobby at some point that's turned into the profession in London, where now you've gotten a job and you're given an opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, that was the only thing in my hand. Yeah. So even my philosophy degree wasn't like 100% completed, and I was like, even if it was, it's not much you can do with philosophy diploma in London. So only thing I could do, I just had this portfolio, and I was going to model agencies and stuff like that. And luckily, in a few months later, I was working on London Fashion Weeks. That time as a kind of paid initial
like
job.
An intern, essentially.
No, I was working with one of the main guy actually, who was one of the main catwalk photographer, Nye McInerney. So I was doing like catwalk photographies with alongside him, with him under his kind of patronage, and which was amazing. I mean, that was my sort of first step into the whole sort of fashion world. We were doing backstages, we were shooting for the houses. So I had like first row view of the upcoming seasons.
At that time, so we're talking, is this like 1997, getting late, like early 2000?
Yeah, 97
and
98,
What camera were you using back then?
Well, for my sort of studio creative work, I was using like I think I had a Zenza. No, at that time I had a Rolleiflex already. I was shooting with a Rolleiflex medium format called SL66 medium format. But for the catwalk, we were using Canon, but still on films for many more years. So this is back.
So you're more focused initially at this part on the contemporary photography, and the fashion side as well. When did this transition into the cinematography, the videography, and bring this kind of all together?
Well, as I said, I studied film aesthetics, and I always been a sort of film buff, and if you ask me like early stage of my photographic career, like how do I see this evolve? I see if something, then I want to make films. That's my kind of way of out of photography and the commercial world and fashion, which I obviously enjoyed, and I spent a good 25 years in it and stuff. But I knew it's not gonna last forever, and the reason I kind of emerged into fashion photography, because in a commercial field, that's the one gives you the most sort of creative freedom, in terms of especially editorial works. You can create, a lot of, creative concepts. So it's not just, liaising with advertising agencies and stuff, but you can be on your own and creating concepts out of scratch.
Yeah, and your consistency from, as you're explaining as a child and going to these more like artistic movie theaters, you've again continued to stay away from the blockbuster content and focus on your passion as well. Has that ever changed down the road, or have you kind of always followed that North Star of what you were, passionate about?
Yeah, of course. Now it would be kind of utopian to think of like I want to be an art house cinematographer or a filmmaker and stuff, because that sort of art form, it's pretty much dying out, unfortunately, and there is no real funding for it. There is no real distribution for it. You know, the new generation of moviegoers that don't really understand.
Yeah,
that
well, I mean,
format.
now your top box office selling films of all time. If you look at the top 20s now, like that have way surpassed your Titanics, and even old movies like Disney's Lion King. I think it's still top 15. But my point is, those top 20s, top 30s are all Marvel.
Yeah.
And I from the business side, on the Blockbuster and commercial side, of course, these large studios in the US, they're gonna create films that sell the most money. But then you have directors like Paul Thomas Anderson that he's kind of stuck to his style, and there is that artistic nature to it as well. I mean, this guy, he's only releasing a film every 3 or 4 years, and people that aren't familiar with him, I mean, you're talking Boogie Nights, you're talking The Master, There Will Be Blood, and recently his last one was The Phantom Thread, and I think he has one coming out this year called Licorice Pizza. That should be released, I think, this month. But my point on that is, we're discussing that, yes, the younger generation, they're more, magnetic to the blockbuster hits, but those directors that are focused on their passion and their art, like Paul Thomas Anderson, they're still going to have those hits. Do you still see a place for these directors, or do you even see them fading out eventually?
Well, they kind of establish themselves in the old paradigm, so that's kind of keep their sort of impetus and bring them over to the new cinema, and they have sort of niche kind of fan base and stuff. But I don't see it. I mean, actually, outside of the US, certain countries like France and even in Hungary and stuff, there is still sort of government initiative of sponsoring cinema. So that's where art house cinema was kind of growing out from, like basically mostly government sponsorships. And before it was coming from government sponsorships, especially in the sort of Eastern Bloc, you had to be very sort of sophisticated how you get certain messages across, and that kind of expanded your creativity tool set, and I think that was the sort of golden age of art house cinema, and certain part of the world, they still have some sort of government sponsorship and stuff, but of course this is gonna be really more difficult to maintain on a global.
So when we talk about, and let's define art house cinema, and I could be wrong, like, would this go down the films such as like Eternal Sunshine, films like, anything by like Charlie Kaufman? Is that more art house cinema, or is it something that even probably myself or the audience wouldn't even know those films to understand that category?
Like Sundance Festival or something.
Yeah, I mean, of course, Sundance is the great sort of platform for the upcoming filmmakers who try to get their voice across and try to do a little bit, sort of independent productions and stuff. But what I'm talking is it's even more hardcore art house cinema, because this is still like indie filmmaking, and in a moment like most of these indie filmmakers, they make it in Sundance and stuff. They all of a sudden they get offered the studio deal, they get offered the pathway to the sort of commercial film, and nothing wrong with that. So don't get me wrong. I'm also on the same sort of path, and I'm not living in a past in that sense. But that sort of, like, let's say for instance, you go to a Tarkovsky movie, which one of my favorite filmmakers and stuff, and like the way they stretch out time, for instance, it's unreproducible in today's cinema world, because people would just walk out of the cinema straight away.
Our attention spans due to TikTok and Instagram are non-existent.
Yeah, absolutely. So that sort of form, and then you even had like some sort of a metaphysical meaning, especially when it comes to Tarkovsky in terms of compositions. There was a lot of way of transforming visual language into a metaphysical meaning and stuff. This it hardly exists today. I mean, maybe in patches, maybe I'm not aware of, maybe
Yeah,
I
like,
don't keep up.
Let's
with
take a movie, for example, and I'm trying to also connect your perspective so people can understand your definition
Sure.
of that. I think we could maybe take the movie The Revenant.
Yeah.
And there's certain scenes in that would be art house. If you're obviously familiar with this
Sure,
film,
yeah,
right?
yeah, sure.
Especially the part where he's revisiting the wife, and it's there's no dialogue. It's very artistic. It's all visual. Is that the definition of maybe taking a Blockbuster and taking art house and kind of piecing it together?
Definitely aesthetically. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, if specifically if you look at that movie, if you take, I mean, the plot is very simple. I mean, it's almost non-plot. I mean, it's very, and it is very visual. It's a cinematography masterpiece in a certain way. I wouldn't say indie art house cinemas used to be cinematography masterpiece because obviously they were on a much lower budget. These guys, The Revenant was shot on a proper budget. They had said they were on locations. They were shooting in an Alexa 65, one of the state-of-the-art camera. So indie art house cinema never had that sort of luxury, or very rarely. Maybe a couple of times a Fellini movie in Italy had like a proper budget. But like they used to be like 16, Super 16, very rarely even 35 millimeter film formats and stuff. So aesthetically we can talk about it, but in the production size, it's a completely different ball game. The Revenant to an art house cinema.
And I took a filmography class in university, so that's a long time ago. So we were kind of brought up on films like Ingmar Bergman's Seventh Seal and stuff like this, and also I might butcher this, but it's from the 1910s or 1920s. It's called The Bicycle. Or The French Bicycle. This is like, would that be also considered like this art house type of production? Where now it's not essentially it's a silent film, but it's again, you have to get your message across visually and without dialogue.
Yeah, no, I think that just probably translate of the technology of that time and stuff. It wasn't an intentional sort of expression. And so, but Bergman is a beautiful example. I would kind of consider maybe art house cinema started with the Seven Seals in a certain way, Bergman had a couple of movies before, but that was like his really.
This one is the Knight is playing
chess with the
chess with the Grim Reaper Death.
Yeah, exactly.
And what's funny is that Knight there, a lot of people don't know, that is Max von Sydow,
exactly.
Which he's a very famous actor. I mean, he's in Shutter Island. He's in tons of movies throughout the 70s. But I was looking at that. I was watching Shutter Island like maybe, I don't know, 2 months ago, and then I looked that up, and you're going through as you're watching movies, you're Googling the cast. We always get sidetracked. Oh, who's this? Who's that? And I'm like, oh my God, this guy was the lead actor in The Seventh Seal, which is.
He became an icon of Bergman. He was in several other Bergman movies later as well. But obviously, because he's a kind of natural talent and stuff, he made his career in Hollywood and became. Kind of
from that essentially
from that
because he is considered Ingmar Bergman, especially when you go into filmography, is probably considered one of the best directors of all time, right up there with your Kubricks and your Kurosawa. These
it's really hard to. Everyone has got a flavor of.
Everyone has,
but I also highly rate Bergman's
levels
in terms of cinematographic composition, the woman, it's just incredible how he was.
So let's jump ahead. So you started to really kickstart your career in London, and you stayed there for 7 years until you moved over to Dubai. Why did you transition to Dubai?
I think it's a sort of 7-8 year sort of life cycles when I started to feel like I just need to do something. I need to move away from London. I need some sort of change. And it's funny, I had eye on New York to kind of go there for a couple of months, try out my luck, my talent in New York, get new inspirations, work with new people in a sort of new market, new environment. And I just got an offer from Dubai to go and work there on some new publishing house and new magazines they launched and stuff like that. And I said, okay, like 6 months, I can do anything anywhere, because 6 months was the sort of length of my contract. And after I went back for a summer break to London, and I just realized I've done. I can't move back. I started to like the sunshine, seeing the sun, in Dubai, in Dubai, and it was a very unique time in place and history. Dubai in the early 2000s was a growing economy. Pretty much the people we were hanging out with were like the same sort of age, very sort of entrepreneurial, and the social scene was very sort of kind of small, but
this is still the beginning of Dubai growing.
Exactly,
like you're talking pre-Burj.
Exactly, yeah, very much.
I mean, and I would assume even at this point that pretentious side of Dubai was probably not even developed yet. Like you were there building Dubai essentially.
Yeah, I mean, the whole city grew in front of my eyes. It's incredible. I mean, especially coming from Europe, when sometimes, even in my country, used to be a joke. There was a very famous building which was scaffolded for 20 years and stuff. And they were scaffolding in the scaffolding and stuff. Because the scaffolding was getting a bit ragged and stuff. So comparing to that sort of environment, this sort of dynamism of a growing city, and the internet, I thought London was international, because most of my friends were like Italians, Greeks, and Germans, and like the whole international sort of setup of London. But Dubai was a different level. Like basically everyone from the 5 corners of the world basically were in Dubai.
Well, everyone's showing up because the city is growing and it's it's coming to life, and there's so much opportunity, especially when cities are growing, to kind of get your your feet on the ground as well. And when you went over there, now at this point, are you running your own company? Are you kind of doing freelance consulting? Yeah. What was the position you were doing?
So after this kind of contract expired with the publishing company, I set up a photo studio, and couple of years later, I set up a magazine called Desert Fish.
Yes,
which was the first sort of contemporary conceptual fashion title in all Middle East. Later on got distributed into 50 countries and stuff, and that was the sort of creative outburst of my works, and other photographers as well who were invited to be part of it. So beside that, I was doing my commercial work, and Desert Fish was the sort of
so the Desert Fish was like a hard copy magazine.
Sure,
and the photography was taking place in Dubai. Mostly, were you dealing with international models or local models?
No, I mean in Dubai we had obviously international models flying in, not for my magazine, but for like just a couple of months stay and stuff. But I also traveled quite a bit, and when I was traveling, I did shoot from China to the US, basically. Wherever we went, we did content for the magazine, and I had also other sort of talented people from the region contributing to the magazines. We had creative writers who were doing their creative piece for the magazine.
And this magazine was distributed worldwide?
Yeah, it got to like 50 countries later on, which was quite
kind of nice. Multiple languages?
No, it's only English.
Only in English. Yeah. And so the reason I was asking that about the models in Dubai and understanding like how that all came together is, well, as you know, in these more strict countries, such as Dubai and the UAE, did you ever face any barriers when trying to put this content together by local authorities?
Yeah, I mean, that was actually the whole sort of manifesto of the magazine. Basically, in a commercial work, we had a lot of restrictions. And quite quickly, when you live in Dubai, you learn the culture, sort of boundaries and restrictions and stuff. And as I mentioned earlier, how the sort of art house cinema was flourishing on these sort of political restrictions in the Eastern Bloc, it's very similar how this magazine came alive to prove creativity and work out a creative language within the sort of cultural boundaries of a Muslim country.
Yes.
And we had sometimes kind of, even funny cases when, for instance, the magazine was sitting on a censorship table for a year because they just didn't understand like how desert fish, there is no fish in a desert. Like why would we call a magazine Desert Fish? Is that like disrespectful for the desert? And so it was like, it was a long, like as I said, 1.5 year of process of approval from the censorship to actually have the first stamp on the first issue and get distributed out. Later on, this became more and more kind of easy and streamlined, but at the beginning was pretty challenging and it was unheard of. Like the first, and we remember when we were presenting to the censor, it was like exactly how you would imagine from a sort of dystopian film. Like I go to Abu Dhabi, the Ministry of Information, and there is a guy sitting there in a room without a window, and it's a long room with a table at the end, and the guy has like a glasses on which are like thick like a
I understand.
glass, and with the mutawa with a long beard, with 20 books on his table. And like you can, it's like it's exactly how you would imagine, or you would set up on a movie to kind of exaggerate the censorship and its power and stuff. But eventually it turned out he was a cool guy, and he loved the magazine, and the ministry.
Yeah, they just need to make sure that you're not crossing any lines and your intentions are correct. Absolutely. And not trying to be controversial as well. Exactly. Did that affect your creative direction when you had to shoot? In which when you are doing the photography, you kind of had to think about, well, we want to do this, but I don't know, this could cross a line, so let's modify.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, at the beginning, it's easy, because that's, as I said, that was the sort of manifesto, and that's the point you try to prove to get creativity within a region with all the creative peoples around. But after a few years, you realize you have got this kind of distorted schizophrenic mindset, when you all of a sudden you hit up an international title and you see a couple kissing and you just think like, oh my God, like,
Yeah, but this is still frowned upon today.
Exactly.
It's still taboo in Dubai, yeah.
And all of a sudden you realize your mindset is kind of adjusted to that sort of culture, and it's not natural. That's one of the reason I kind of left it. Not because they were not treating us bad, it's not like whatever, but just for the sort of freedom of expression when it comes to art form, it does help.
It did limit you, but also you have to take into consideration these are their cultural values for thousands of years, and there's a certain line that if they want to, maintain their culture, they can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. So at that point, is Desert Fish, does the magazine still exist, or did you essentially give it up?
Yeah, no, we kind of stopped it. You can still buy on eBay and stuff
as like a
collectible item.
Why did you decide to stop? Because of these creative barriers, or was it something else?
I think it just kind of tired up in a certain way. Even my path went out. We opened a concept store in Dubai. I had too much things on my hand, and I'm still, because we've done 9 issues, and I still kept saying like I want to finish with the number 10. It's never really happened, but I don't know. Just as I said, bridge of incidents. It took my kind of career into a little bit different path, and we were still doing another magazine which took it over. But a kind of a magazine which was connected to a concept store I was working on, and that was like a art concept space, merged fashion, retail, exhibition space, photo, film studio, and we created this in a sort of creative hub of Dubai. organizing a lot of events and stuff. And that entity also had its own publication for like, I think 4 or 5 issues we did.
Yeah, and well, we met initially probably, I'm going to say last New Year's at a mutual friend's dinner party. It might have even been New Year's or maybe Christmas. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, it was a birthday.
Lena's Elena. When we were talking at that point, you were discussing that you were also in Dubai in the production side of the video, and you were involved. They have studios set up there. Sure. Therefore, you have your hands on the technology. Were you involved in the consulting or creation of those studios, or were you just using them for your content?
Well, I built 2 studios, but they were predominantly like still photography studios, catering mostly for still works. But yeah, they're quite a substantial film industry in Dubai, and that mostly driven from the commercial market. You know, Dubai caters for the Middle East in general.
But the luxury market.
Yeah, I mean, TV commercials, promo films. Now they started to do obviously some narrative formats as well, and TV series and stuff like that. But pretty much the whole Middle East was channeling their commercial works through Dubai. Saudis didn't have film studios that time, and it's a huge market. Obviously, you know, Oman, Yemen.
So
Qatar.
everyone, the central hub was Dubai. Was there anything in Abu Dhabi?
Well, Abu Dhabi later on they set up their film funds and the kind of government initiative of you know getting tax rebates and different sort of programs bringing their international productions and stuff. But Dubai was always the sort of hub of commercial.
And is it still like that today? Or is there any tensions between Dubai and Abu Dhabi, or are they kind of brother sister?
Well, that's a good point. No, that not tensions on a surface, but obviously there is a kind of competitive spirit, I would say, between Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Dubai still have the infrastructure way ahead of Abu Dhabi when it comes to this particular industry. So Abu Dhabi is more governmental kind of sponsored when it comes to film and production. Dubai is more just driven by the commercial market, which is naturally and organically grown in Dubai.
Yes.
So
and are a lot of the studios, like the American studios or European studios or producers or these bit larger studio companies, do they have partnerships in Dubai? Do they come there, or is it more predominantly owned by Dubai companies?
Yeah, it's mostly Dubai-based
companies.
The big studios, as far as I know, they're not really present in Dubai. Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump ahead from there. You're in Dubai, and then now you're off the grid, essentially, or let's say you're here in Thailand. Now, when we initially were discussing, I might be wrong, but if I do remember, these couches, you'll end up, next thing you know, we're going to be like down here, like talking. That's the problem with, you slide out. Sometimes I just put my foot up just to be sure I don't slide out. Yeah. But you come over to Thailand. Was the intention to stay in Thailand and set up business in Thailand, or did you, let's say, get stuck in Thailand, and let's avoid all words with the C word, just because YouTube fucks up your view count and they get all pissed off. Yeah. Anyways, I don't want to get banned. But when you came over to Thailand, was that the intention, or did you kind of just get stuck here on a vacation?
No, actually, it was before all started, before that started,
before the war.
Before the war. No, it's basically I just for the various reasons I mentioned now, and also I realized, like, you know, this sort of path of fashion and commercial work has to progress. So it's kind of you know, I realized, like, as much as I enjoyed it and I enjoyed my life in Dubai, I enjoyed you know, my friends and all the sort of creative activity I was doing, I knew my purpose is much more motion pictures than still photography. I was doing, like, you know, music videos from an early age. I was, you know, doing you know, TV commercials here and then. So beside still photography, I always been in halfway in half foot in a sort of motion pictures industry, but I realized, commercials are not really satisfying my interest and stuff. And being a film buff and growing up on Arthouse cinema, as we mentioned earlier, I always knew I want to do narrative filmmaking, and I see the limitations of that in Dubai. That's not something I could see to take up as a challenge and turn it to a sort of desert wish project of working with that sort of cultural environment and turn it into a narrative film, because obviously the financiers coming from sort of governmental entities when it comes to Arab cinema, or it coming from private sector, and they have their sort of take on that. So I quite early realized if I want to get into narrative filmmaking, that's not going to happen in the Middle East.
How do you define narrative filmmaking?
Well, anything in sort of from the short to the feature format, TV series.
Okay.
So non-commercial fiction, drama, action.
So you're getting in you're a script writer. It's a full-on production essentially at this point. And now you've chosen Thailand as that destination. Did you initially come to Bangkok, and why Thailand?
Yeah, I mean, I was like very hesitant. I traveled pretty much extensively to 5 continents, and I had a few other places in mind, even Hungary, which has got an incredible film industry. After the UK is the second largest film industry in 2019, I think, in Europe. So it was quite sort of tempting to go to Hungary and maybe try to get my career to that direction. But I used to come to Bangkok quite often, and I always thought I want to try at least for a few months to live in Bangkok, and I know there is a sort of indie film, international indie film community in Bangkok, which I was in contact with even before I moved here. So it was just a tryout. I said, like, listen, worst come to worst, I had to go back to Dubai, or I move over to Shanghai, or maybe go back to Hungary, but just let's try. So it worked out quite well. I was working on a couple of short films. I picked up on a couple of commercial works as well. So it was quite promising, and I thought I made the right choice, and I still think I made the right choice. And when all of a sudden things started to get a little bit more locked down,
So which year did you arrive in here? One sec, maybe put your mic down a bit.
19.
Just so it won't block your face too much.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. 2000. So you came here pretty much right before the war broke out.
1 year before, yeah.
Right before the war.
Yeah,
that's what we're gonna call it now.
Yeah.
Okay, before we'll jump into that, I'm just gonna take a quick step back, and especially into your passion and career for filmography. So I read that you won an award, I believe, in 2014 for the IFF or the Alchemy.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. What was that all about?
That was actually how my fashion film career started. I was doing like still photography, and we built a quite nice set in my studio with a very talented team of creative people, set designers, art directors, which was a sort of medieval steampunk stroke alchemist kitchen. And we built this all out of sort of junkyard pipes and metal frames and cables and stuff. And before the, because it was originally for a still photography editorial for Desert Fish. And a day before I decided this set looks amazing. Let's just do a couple of shots with the 5D. I had a friend of mine who was a camera guy more than me that time. He came in, he did a couple of shots of the set with the models. As I was doing stills, we were doing the motion picture version of that. And later on, we edited together to a 2-3 minutes fashion film, which was a fairly new format back then. It wasn't really picking up in terms of big brands and stuff. Yep. It was still a sort of experimental phase of fashion film. And I put it on YouTube, and Fred Sweet, who is a organizer of the biggest fashion film festival in San Diego, he sent me an email asking if we can show this on his film festival, and I felt very flattered, and I didn't even know there is such thing as fashion film festival. So he showed in that year, and later on next year they did a big international film award, which was in Hollywood with the red carpet and everything, and that's when it won for the best fashion
Photography.
fashion category.
Yes.
And stuff. So that was an honor of him, and later on, another film of mine won another awards there. It was incredible because it's the biggest fashion film festival, and normally people submit their work there, and I was kind of invited. I'm still very grateful for Fred, because after that kind of made me down the path of creating a lot of fashion films, and I enjoyed as much as the editorial format of fashion photography, because again it gives you a full palette of creative freedom.
Also, this builds your portfolio, and now you have credibility, and it puts your name on the mat. And I'm assuming from that people start looking for you.
I wouldn't say that necessarily. No, I mean that was more like a kind of industry acknowledgement, in a way, or like the industry internal sort of appreciation. But yeah, definitely was an experiment. I also went to San Diego. I met fellow filmmakers there, and I realized how extensive is this format already that time was, and it was just a good way of reassurance of what I'm doing. It's maybe interests some people and stuff, but it didn't really bring commercial work. It brought commercial works locally, obviously in Dubai for other fashion designers and stuff, but it's not like all of a sudden I got a studio course.
So these types of films that would go into this fashion film category, let's say, is there any narrative, or is it pure visual? What are the messages that you're trying to convey through the content?
Well, that's the beauty of a fashion film. It's completely down to you how you take it. Some people just purely doing a visual concept, based on some sort of idea, which is whatever, and they don't put any sort of narrative. Some people put a whole short film in it, and sort of package it in sort of stylized environment and call it a fashion film. Even someone like, let's say, Chanel used to do these big epic fashion films, which has got a narrative story and stuff. So yeah, it really depends. That's why I'm saying it's a very free canvas, and it really depends on what you put on it.
Did you have your own message, that a theme, a direction that you were kind of trying to convey, or and that would be your interpretation? But if I was to watch it, everyone's kind of open and subjective to their own interpretation of what that piece of content is? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, it has got some sort of experimental flavor to it, so it's not necessarily as strict as everyone has to have their interpretation on it. Just a free flow of visuals, and I had my reason of shooting the way I was shooting it. I had my story behind it. If you have your interpretation, it's yours, and I'm not going to be offended.
Could you compare that to, and I could be completely wrong, but could it be comparable to, let's say, skateboarding filmography or cinematography art, where it's like, again, if you were to film a skateboard film, and they go out and they're just doing their art, again, there's no message there, but it's just the visual aspect of what you're creating.
Fashion films could have message, I would say. It's not just about the clothes. Actually, a lot of times you're watching, even on very acknowledged film festivals, you're watching fashion films, and they have serious, even political messages sometimes. So, as I said, it's just down to the creator how you want to take it and what you call fashion film. It's a very free-flowing format and tool set. Obviously, by default, it should have some sort of style element in it. and if it's that style element is the main message, then that's it. If you want
just
to
to kind of direct the narrative or the content of that flow, there's some sort of structure, a little bit.
I do believe, like, stories are the most engaging for human viewers. So if you put a narrative into a visual message, then obviously you're gonna engage the audience much easier than just pleasing, photography.
So let's continue on your story. And as you've moved to Bangkok, and actually a lot of people, they might not be aware, usually Thailand, they win the commercial advertisers of the year quite consistently. Is that fair to say? Like when they come out, they do these commercial awards, and it seems Thailand's always winning them on the TV commercial awards.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really familiar with all the Thai advertising industry, and later on maybe we can talk about it. Why? But
I know all the information I have on that. That's the end of the conversation.
No, but I do know. I mean, there used to be a lot of sort of humorous Thai advertisings, which you can find on. It has got this sort of funky, comical element in it, and I appreciate those ones, and some of them were globally appreciated as well. So yeah.
So now we're here. We'll pop this up later. We'll see in post production. But you came over and first, thanks a lot. You helped set up our lighting because we had absolutely no idea what we were doing when we first got started. And then you came over and you filmed a commercial that I was in, and I helped you with that. Whatever happened to that? You sent me the link. Did it go to YouTube, or maybe it's something on Thai YouTube? And explain that project. What was that about? And I thought it was a pretty funny time.
Yeah, it was actually. I was approached by a Chef Care, which is like a charity-based food brand.
Yeah.
Available in 7-Elevens and some other retail outlets and stuff. But that was. I just love the idea of, first of all, you're very camera ready. You speak well. You're not gonna get shy from the camera. And on top of this, you were living above 7-Eleven, so we could tell a story with that. Obviously,
yeah. And the food was good. I ended up eating it. The Talise was here. He ended up. That was our dinner. It was almost. It was meant for 7-Eleven food. Yeah. But the quality was decent.
I mean, the way they set up the project, it's like Michelin star or kind of celebrity chefs doing packaged food, which is available in 7-Eleven for affordable price. This started as a charity project to give away packaged food for the people who need and stuff, and later on this transformed into a brand and stuff. I think the commercial did go out, the trailer version of it.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure.
But I haven't seen it in any of the 7-Elevens, maybe in Bangkok.
The product?
The product.
No, it is here.
Really?
Yeah. I even they have posters and stuff. Always when it's a new, I kind of keep an eye on it because I see it. And
I'll have to keep an eye on that commercial because I think you were saying Bukau was in it, or I don't know if I only saw the part that I was in.
I can send you the trailer.
Maybe I don't know if I've seen the trailer. It could have been because we probably filmed that back in March or something. It must have been March, April, something like that.
Yeah, no, there is a trailer version which all the sort of celebrities are part of it as well.
There we go. I can connect with them, get them on the podcast. I got an in.
Yeah.
So currently, what are you working on now in Thailand?
Well, I mean, I'm still pursuing what the main goal was, of my, relocation. Basically, we're working on some sort of feature film project, which are in a pipeline, and trying to pull together an international network of people and probably produce features here in Phuket in a foreseeable future. So that's the plan. That's what I'm working on. That's what I'm here for. And it looks like things are going in a promising direction. You never know until actually go into production.
It's feature films like American feature films, Thai feature films.
Well, definitely not Thai, and definitely not Thai language as of now. We just try to produce in Thailand for global market, global distribution, feature film content. with the network of people who are not all of them based here. Some of them, from other side of the world. So that's what I'm here for. That's why my kind of predominant focus goes for. And beside of that, I'm picking up commercial works here and then, as a sort of side work.
This feature film that you're working on, obviously you can't probably release too much information due to NDAs or whatnot like that, unless you're allowed to. But the question more is, what is your role and responsibility in that type of project?
Well, at the moment I'm kind of fluctuating. I'm doing directing and I'm doing cinematography at the same time. When it comes to short film or shorter formats and stuff, obviously at one point, most probably I have to make a decision what I do. So certain projects I might be involved as cinematographer, certain project I might be involved as a director. I also do a bit of writing. We've got writers' room together. We work with talented people, probably more talented than me when it comes to writing and stuff. So it's just a creative hub of people who try to put our sort of will and effort together to get a feature film out in the foreseeable future. So
when you're working on a project and you're not wearing all the hats, meaning you're not director, cinematographer, and script and involved in writing and script writing, but let's say you're just involved as the cinematographer. Could you explain the process of developing the rapport and the relationship between the cinematographer and the director? How does that work essentially? Because I could imagine creative ideas can clash and you need to eventually align. How can you give some examples of maybe a time when you've had that experience and maybe some of the challenges that you could face?
Yeah. I mean, it can really vary, I mean, it can be a commercial work when you just you meet the director just a day before the shoot, or a recce day, or a scout day, and can be a short film. For instance, I was shooting a short film in Bali with English director Mike McDowell, and he flew me into Bali just to do recce, just to get familiar with each other. We were, doing readings with the actors, and it was a long process of creativity, how we merged our vision together into a short film. But this sometimes it's much quicker. I did another short film which was shot in 2 countries, in Thailand and Egypt, with another director, an Egyptian director who I flew from Dubai just in Thailand. We had a couple of meetings, but mostly we were getting into details why we were already on set and stuff, because of obviously the possibilities and stuff. So it really depends on stuff. And as you said, the rapport is very important, because you end of the day you have to have the vision fulfilling the director's requirement, and this vision has to sometimes merge into their directions and stuff. And until now, touch wood, it's always worked out good. I never had a broke relationship with the director, and because I understand, because I can be on both sides of the process, so I know how does it work, and it's nothing more fulfilling when 2 creative minds come together and you actually create something.
There's some synchronicity
and better than what you would do alone.
What is the difference in the scope of work between the director and the cinematographer?
Yeah, it's again really depends. Some directors really hands-on in terms of what sort of visual mood they want and what sort of visual language they want to create, especially when it comes to commercials, because in commercials, most of the time an advertising agency involved, and you work out a treatment, you work with the mood boards, everything is pretty much decided before the day of the shoot. But when it comes to narrative filmmaking and short films and stuff, your vision normally accepted by the director, and he gives you a bit more freedom in terms of how you want to move the camera, what sort of lighting you want to do, blocking as well most of the time. Some director works very strictly with storyboards, so then if you have storyboards, he wants to stick with that. Some directors don't even have storyboard. If they have storyboard, they're just like a kind of reference for us to understand the production process and stuff, and how many shots we have and how many actors. So it really depends. There is no kind of kick-out solution. It always depends on directors, their way of working, their way of practice. Sometimes you have to save them, because they focusing on maybe the performance of the actors and stuff, which I think is one of the most important part of the director. And you have to save them, to make sure you have the coverage, you have enough footage to get that scene in the editing room ready for.
Yeah, and you're always going to be shooting more instead of less to make sure you have enough, meat to work with.
In case if you have a time frame for each, for sure, yeah.
Where again we were discussing before we jumped on the podcast, and I thought would be very interesting because again we can talk about the whole technical side of it, but we want to keep this as high level for the general public to understand as well. And I think to connect your profession with where we're living in Thailand is to touch upon some of those experiences. With that in mind, living in Thailand, the humidity is insane. Maybe when you're dealing with the general authority in the Thai government, there's certain regulations and certifications and licenses that are required for shooting. For example, in Phuket, issues with drone footage. Do you have any examples of something that if someone wanted to be a cinematographer, director, or just in general, come and do production in Thailand, some things that they should prepare themselves in advance, whether, again, that has to do with the environment or even the political side?
I would say, to be honest, as I said, I've worked in several countries around the world, and Thailand is pretty much production friendly, It depends on the size of the production you do, obviously. When it comes to, let's say, a feature film, you have to have the same as pretty much most of the countries. You have to have your script approved by the authorities and stuff. So you submit that. Normally it takes 1 to 2 months. They skim it through or they read it through.
Even if it's going to be a foreign film and it's not a Thai film?
Yeah, for sure. But coming from Dubai, I have to say this is a much more easier process than dealing with authorities there. Even you mentioned drone permits. in Dubai it's nearly impossible to shoot with drones. You have to have the government official on set if he shows up, because sometimes they just forget to show up and stuff. On set, during the shoot, they have to approve all the footages. You have to send them the dailies. It's comparing to that in Thailand is a much more easy.
So when you're trying to get your content across, you're not going to be facing as many issues.
Yeah, as I said, it depends on the size of the production. So, for instance, we shot a short film here a couple of months ago, just pretty much based on we were shooting on private lands or private properties, so we were not blocking roads and stuff, so we didn't have to deal with the authorities and stuff. But for instance, we had a very kind and surprising help from the brand new Phuket State Prison, who allow us to shoot outside their premises with the guards in a shot, opening the gates, walking out. So they were incredibly helpful. I could not even imagine anything like this in Dubai or most of the parts of the world.
Is this the new prison up here they have here?
The Bangzhou.
Bangzhou.
Yeah,
that thing's massive.
Yeah, it looks like a film set. It's actually kind of
I don't know
inspired.
Are there prisoners in there at this moment? I thought it's I don't even know if it was open.
Yeah, it is open. It's
it is.
Apparently it's already fully occupied.
Fully occupied. This place, I don't know if it's maximum security but it's huge.
It looks like a film set. Yeah,
Yes.
it could be Alcatraz, film set.
It really looks like those walls are probably, I'm gonna say,
8-10 meters.
Yeah,
at least. Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's beautiful, and the prison director who was kind enough, and I would love to say thank you to him in this form, in case if he's watching the podcast.
Yeah.
He let us shoot not inside the prison, but we didn't even need inside the prison. But basically, our main protagonist just walks out of 9-year sentence, and we could film that with their original guards in their uniforms, opening the gates, and he walks out. It was incredible.
And they probably didn't have to do a lot of pre-planning. I would assume you kind of can even show up that day and be like, "Hey, can we do this?"
We went there for one day before, or one meeting before. We explained what we need, and that was it. It was really
well, I think that's Thailand in a nutshell as well. They're very, if you ask politely and you know you're quite fair, they're quite happy to help out.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, on the same shoot, and even for me, this was one of the first when we did like a kind of, you know, mid-sized production for a small short film, but at least, you know, we had to deal with different sort of locations and stuff. So I had different experiment, you know. Sometimes, for instance, I had one location which was a grocery store, you know, and there was an old lady in a grocery store close to where I was living here in Bangkok, and she seemed very helpful. I went there and I told her, like, we're gonna come and shoot a couple of hours, a small scene in a theme. And, oh, it's amazing. So we go there and set up the camera. And the neighbors coming, they showing their cousins or granddaughter and saying she's also been in film. And the whole community was very supportive, you know.
Yeah.
So I thought, like, they're so nice, I'm going to give them 1,000 baht or something as an appreciation of their help and stuff. And all of a sudden, the daughter shows up, you know, of the old lady.
Yes.
And she's just gone nuts, you know, like, how can I be so disrespectful with 1,000 baht? This place should cost at least 10,000, and you know, like that typical Phuket kind of thing. So we got the prison for free from a very helpful gentleman of the director of the state prison of Phuket. But the grocery store gun was, like, you know, a much more difficult task to secure.
Yeah, maybe she's there was an opportunity she saw and she took it as well, right?
Sure.
Which, I mean, that can happen anywhere in the world, I'm sure.
For sure, no, I'm just saying, so I cannot say it's always easy and it's always helpful in Thailand. No.
Yeah, it's I can see that definitely if there's opportunity, she might try to take it as well. In terms of production and overall budgeting and cost, it's much easier to film in Dubai because, well, you can predict the weather. But in Thailand, well, to a certain extent, and it's probably not going to rain, or you could guess it's not going to rain. But in Thailand, like, the weather can be quite difficult to predict. Does that uncertainty of weather, is that built into the budget? Meaning, just today we want to shoot, but we can't, so everything can get delayed a day, 2 days, 3 days.
Well, I mean, Dubai might not be the right example because obviously they pretty much predictable weather patterns there. But I mean, most of the world, it's like you've got 4 seasons, and, you know, rain and winds and thunders can occur in Europe and stuff. So in that sense, Thailand is pretty, you know, predictable in a way. You know, I mean, a couple of hours shower can break down a set, but that's everywhere in the world. You know, that's not going to bring production here. What brings production to Thailand is the affordability. You know, the prices here, it's pretty competitive comparing to the, you know, most of the global prices.
Just in terms of, like, if you show up with a crew, food, accommodation, even like local staff to bring on, I mean, you're going to be saving quite a bit.
I mean the crew salaries obviously much more competitive or inexpensive. I'm not saying cheap because you know, but it's competitive comparing to the rest of the world. And you know, location permits, for instance, if you go down that way as well, it's much more affordable. Let's say in Thailand, sometimes if you want to shoot, like, let's say, a lot of times I had clients who comes there and they think, like, okay, Dubai, so let's have Burj Khalifa in the background. I say, oh, wait a minute, you know, do you have $20,000 budget to secure that, you know, to get, even just put the camera down in front of Burj Khalifa?
There's like a license.
Well, there is no set fee, so, but it could stretch easily to $20,000 for sure. Yeah, wow. I mean, that's not talking about police closing down the roads and stuff, but just a sort of intellectual property fee on Burj Khalifa and stuff. So, in that sense, Thailand is much more affordable and much more, you know, user friendly when it comes to production.
When shooting in Thailand, in terms of the religious aspect in temples, Buddha statues. Are there any regulations that come into play when you're shooting this imagery?
Good question. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure about it. I don't think they're that sensitive for photography as, let's say, the Muslim culture, because they're, women, and there is a lot of restrictions and stuff. I think here it's pretty open-minded.
Pretty simple as well. So recently you were telling me you're working with a client, Bill, and Bill's correct name, right?
Bill, yeah.
Yeah, Bill. Okay, so you're working with Bill, and he has a yacht stem cell clinic. I believe it's pronounced Demarest.
Demarest.
Yeah.
Or Demarest, I think, if you're French.
Yeah, I'm not. Hey, Demarest. No. Working with him, what was this project you guys were doing? Because I saw some stuff on your Instagram at Bangkok Cinematographer. We'll plug you later. So I saw the stuff on your Instagram, and you were working with our missing guest, Charlie. Shout out, Charlie. Where the fuck are you? So we got Hans in the background here, but helping out with on the ones and twos. But what was that project you guys were working on? It looked quite interesting.
Basically, Bill has got a new clinic which needed a promo film. And instead of doing like the regular walkthrough of a clinic, doing your B-roll close-ups of beautiful environment, a patient launching in the IV
doctor
room,
with checkboard,
the checkboards and stuff. We decided let's have him as a face of the clinic, because obviously no one can represent that brand better than himself, who invented that enterprise. And he plays the part, and he's the main hero of the film, and the whole promo is showing his skills and the concept, just a little bit out of the box, not your typical clinic promo film, but trying to give it a different context.
When you put that production together, would you consider that small, medium-sized production? Small production. And your team, how many people? When you're building the team.
Yeah.
How many people would be involved?
That was I think we were 3 or 4 only beside me, so definitely small. I don't think at the current infrastructure in Phuket you can do any even mid-sized productions. We try to look on the final product, better than what we have the tool set to work with here in terms of equipment and lightings and camera rigging and stuff like that. But we're really working on the basics, like almost student film kind of category when it comes to Phuket.
Have you looked at like Pattaya, filming in Pattaya?
I haven't filmed in Pattaya, but I assume it's similar. Yeah,
I've seen some huge sets in Pattaya actually. Like if you go to the resorts and stuff, they always have they're filming Thai TV shows there.
Sure, yeah, no.
And
well, the good thing with
resorts.
Yeah, the good thing with Pattaya, they can just drive down from Bangkok easily in a couple of hours and stuff. But in Phuket, it's a little bit more challenging.
Or Hua Hin, would they have anything there as well? Would Hua Hin have anything set?
No, I did shoot in Hua Hin, but we took everything. I took crew from Bangkok to shoot there and stuff. I don't think they have anything. In Dubai, in Phuket, it's pretty much with Charlie, and we tried to put together a set we can work with, a set of equipment we can work with on small projects. But when it comes to even mid-sized productions, we have to bring everything from Bangkok.
And are you renting this equipment to bring it in for that production?
For sure, yeah. I mean, let's say on Bills, we were just working from what we have available here and in our hand, but if it would come to mid-sized productions, everything. I mean, you cannot even. I mean, Charlie used to make the fun of it, like he has the only C stand in
all of Phuket.
All of Phuket. So.
Do you know Russell at all? The guy that does casting and stuff here for.
I know of him. I never met him, but yeah, I know of him. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
But yeah, it's very challenging, and it's kind of interesting because we were talking recently with a couple of guys there, like why didn't organically grow a little bit more a larger infrastructure when it comes to filmmaking in Phuket. And I compare it a little bit to Bali, where I've done still photography productions. I've done short films there, like a 11 days short film we shot there and stuff. And they have a quite good infrastructure. You can rent HMI lights, you can rent a crane, you can rent basic stuff, and if not, then key crew can come to Jakarta, really similar, but they have film studios and stuff. And I always compare Bali with Phuket in terms of the footfall of tourism, and the industry is pretty much based on tourism and whatever. And for some reason in Phuket, the film industry didn't organically grow out during these years. Maybe it's time for it now. I don't know.
Could it have to do with the fact that because Phuket does rely on tourism, that a lot of these hotspots where you would want to film, there's just too many tourists? Like, how are you going to go film at, let's say, one of the viewpoints in Koran when there's about 95 Chinese buses running around?
Could be. I mean, when it comes to production and when they have the budget,
they can shut it down.
They can shut it down. And Bali is very much in a similar sort of shoes in terms of a flux of tourists there. So I think it's just interesting because, probably, the major requirements for videography and film, I call it videography because that's the sort of market Phuket has so far. It's like, the hotels, the hoteliers, the food and beverage, the resorts,
it's not too diverse in that sense.
Exactly.
This ecosystem is revolved around tourism. So everything connected to tourism is pretty much the content you're going to be creating. Unless you're some lunatics on a mushroom podcast on the beach, and who knows?
But potentially, I mean, Phuket has got amazing locations, so it could cater for, international global clients here and stuff, and maybe that's the future to go.
Where has been the most your best maybe not even best experience, but most interesting place to shoot in all of Thailand that you've been to? Maybe something very off the beaten path, and I'm not even sure if you can share that or if it's a secret.
Most interesting in terms of scenery,
in terms of scenery.
I tell you what, I had one of the most amazing location, which was actually one of my most tragic day of my cinematography career, was in Egypt, where we were shooting this short film I was just mentioning like last year. Around last year or 2 years, I don't know. I'm lost time.
Nobody knows what
became very.
It's still 2019.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where we're all at. Yeah.
So we drove like 14 hours in a minibus with the crew down to most amazing locations in Egypt, which is no one actually shot there apparently. It was some military controlled area, looked like a CGI, like sort of salt rock formations, white rock formations, like mushroom shaped rock formations, peaking up to like 4 or 5 meter high, even taller. And we went down early morning and we set up. We did a technical recce a day before back in Egypt. Everything worked fine, and the crew just plugged some sort of wrong cables into my red camera, and the whole thing just blew up in a way as I couldn't even roll a minute on that location. So it's the most amazing location ever I've been,
and you didn't
in terms of natural sort of formations and stuff. And I don't have one single shot of it, a minute shot of it, because literally from the first plug, they just fried the motherboard.
It was probably
of the camera.
like a conversion of voltage issue and their outlet to your
later
your
on we found a guy who was hilarious in Egypt. He came. They just told me there is one guy who knows a lot about red cameras in Cairo. So we drove back to Cairo, and he came out to a little Starbucks with a plastic bag and one of these multimeter, things which everyone has or whatever, and a couple of screwdrivers, And he took my red camera, apart in like 3 minutes. It was in pieces, and I was freaking out. The guy was like this, like when, when you can see a plastic bag is like a few years old, you know, like he had all his tool set in this small little bag. So he took the red part and he just got some little part of it and like said, oh, that's the one.
And he knows what's...
And it's not only he knows that, he had that little transistor whatever in his plastic bag to replace.
You're lucky then.
And since then my camera is running full. I never had any breakdown and stuff, but it was hilarious. But that was one of the most amazing locations I've ever been.
And what about in Thailand?
Thailand, I love Bangkok. I love shooting in Bangkok. You know, I just can't have enough of that city.
Specifically, where? Like on the canals?
Just any corner of Bangkok. It's just unbelievable. I love it. You know?
How is it?
Especially after Dubai. You know, Dubai is everything is brand new. So even when I used to go to New York, I shot New York, US quite a few times, and in Europe and stuff. Living in Dubai, you just lose that sense of textures and layers of meanings to the city, and everything just brand new and built in the last 30 years. So Bangkok has got the kind of everything, you know. You've got your luxury, you've got your grunge, you've got your...
There's layers. Instead of Dubai is a single layer of, pretentious, high-end, brand new.
Yeah. I think Bangkok is very photogenic. As I said, I just used to go down doing camera tests on I used to live in Sukhumvit and stuff, and just I take the footage out, and I've got shots of people and the street foods there, and you can just watch it. It's amazing.
Bangkok, especially. It's where old meets new as well, because there is still that new development in these. You have your 5-star hotels down, let's say the Mandarin Oriental, and across you have the Icon, and then you can go down the road and there's probably the lady that's been selling the same pad thai for the past 50 years as well. But they have those layers.
Other similar kind of journey I had once. I went to a shoot in New Delhi, and we decided on the last day, let's just go down to the Taj Mahal, which is like, 5 hours drive or something from Delhi. And I just, it was like a comedy show, like what people carries on. The popular, like the cities and the villages, they don't stop. They kind of grow one into the other. And it's just incredible, like how, like 3 people on a bicycle, you see a big truck with the top chop off, and loaded with another truck. It's just hilarious, like that sort of visual journey, from New Delhi to Taj Mahal. It's also on top of my
here
list.
In Thailand too, right? You see that a lot here. A family of 4 on a bike.
4 or 5 on a bike, and
even here you have the dancing bear when you stop at the traffic light. It's just hilarious. I highly recommend to anyone to do
dancing bear in New Delhi.
Like
what is that?
The bear they bring there, and with the monkey, and it's a bit of animal torture and stuff. But
they actually have a bear, a real live bear.
I had one, so the car stopped at the taxi we were in, and just the guy came with the monkey and the bear dancing.
Well, I think that's the clip we use at the beginning. Just throw the monkey in there. We've probably gone 2 hours.
No, we're on 1:30 almost.
Oh wow, that's good timing. See, it goes easy, eh?
Yeah, it goes
real quick. I mean, it doesn't. It's once you get going, it gets quite easy. Now,
no, I mean, you are amazing with asking questions.
I keep it going. I try to keep the flow going. We'll wrap it up now because we did a sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so there was one thing I wanted to know, something that was like recently on the news. I don't know if you've seen it. The incident with Alec Baldwin. So I kind of wanted to know, how does something like that happen? So the cinematographer got shot dead. The director got shot as well. Yeah. So what would the protocol be on set for something like that to not happen? Like, why did the prop can't go off?
Sure. I mean, that was an indie production. So if it's a union production in the US, these things could never happen. I mean, even US, UK, Europe, there is very serious regulations when it comes to gun, usage on set and stuff. And normally you have a gun handler who's got a license, and there's a lot of it. I don't want to be conspiratorial, but that's a very weird story. That's a very, very weird story. And I cannot even visually imagine how this could happen accidentally. I mean, as I said, I don't want to be conspiratorial, but it's very strange.
Yeah,
Very
when I heard
strange.
that story, especially, I can understand one person get shot, but how did a bunch of people keep? It doesn't make sense.
And
He was filming. He was practicing aiming at the camera. It was like a shot aiming at the camera, and both of them were like behind the camera.
Yeah, but
And then-
isn't it just one bullet?
Oh.
So is this like the Kennedy conspiracy?
exactly.
There's a second shooter?
Exactly. Exactly. No, I mean, obviously it went political. It became the gun control issues in the US and all that sort of thing. So that's why I'm saying it's just something.
But the
really
part that makes no sense is why is there ever live ammunition in any of the guns on set? Ever.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't that just be like, if you don't want to get shot, none of these guns have, well,
Yeah, no,
that
I
part
never
I don't
heard.
get.
Yeah.
I never heard anything.
So that's a bit confusing. Yeah, that's a good
But it's a
question.
good
'Cause
question, and it's kind of shaked up the whole film industry in a way, and there is a lot of people, who's talking out now, and as I said, it became
Yeah.
quite sort of political and stuff.
But you say that's an indie film. It wasn't like a.
It wasn't a
Hollywood
big
set.
union film. Then there's no way that something
Yeah, I
like
don't
this would happen.
Alec Baldwin, I don't know, maybe his career's over. He's only filming indies now. I don't know. All right. Well, right before we wrap it up, one last thing we wanted to touch upon, as we always end the show, is what's next for you? What do you have in the pipeline that you can share with us? And do you see yourself staying in Thailand, or what are the next steps?
To be honest, I'm just going with the flow, especially in today's world and today's sort of environment and stuff. And I don't know. I really hard to tell. I do see myself as Thailand is offering opportunities when it comes to productions and my plans for future. But it's really hard to plan these days, and sometimes just something pops up and you pack and go and stuff. But as of now, I see myself. As I said, I went to Dubai initially for 6 months, and it became 14 years. So it's like
I mean, in especially now with the current situation, I think probably
Exactly.
most people have the same answer. And Thailand's a great place to be stuck.
absolutely.
Meaning, like, and there's a lot of uncertainty coming up over the next year. We don't know what's going to happen. So it's better to just kind of
Yeah.
not overthink it, and just, if you got work and you can keep moving forward, and just stabilize yourself until maybe things turn around. But I think most people that are answering that question are in the same situation of just, I'll just, if this is working, I'll keep doing this. I don't think too much far ahead, because travel is just a nightmare right now.
No, I mean, for me as well, I kind of been seduced into the urban living in my entire life. I not only lived in cities, but I lived like that center of cities, from Budapest, London, Dubai, Bangkok, always like center, not even suburbs and stuff. So since I moved down to Phuket and living in the countryside, I can't see myself going back to the city. So even if anything pops up as a sort of job or project and stuff, I don't see myself permanently going back to the urban living and stuff. So that's what actually this whole new era of new context of global situation brought me into.
Yeah, and
so I enjoy a lot.
It's great in these environments. Again, I lived in Shenzhen, a city of 14 million, and when you're in there, you don't really notice it, but it's when you leave.
Yeah.
And I came to Phuket as well 6 years ago, and I went back. And when I went back, it was, or even if I go to Bangkok, it's a bit overwhelming with too many distractions or noise, but not literal noise, just like, and I don't want to say hippy dippy frequencies and all this shit flying around. It's just like, here is so peaceful. It's so quiet, there's no rat race. I mean, we can sit up and you can have if you have a meeting with your client, you can go meet them at a coffee shop.
Yeah.
You don't need to throw on a suit and go into the 20th floor of the Chrysler building in New York. And
Although I miss that sometimes.
Yeah.
I know what you mean, exactly.
Even that's
Yeah,
nice to throw on the monkey suit like once in a while. But the second you put it on, after you leave, you're like, get me the hell out of this thing. Like, I got to throw some shorts, throw a bathing suit on, and go to the beach.
Yeah.
Okay, so this will be your camera. If you can just tell everyone how to find you, which your website and I think your Instagram would probably be the best way, and then we'll throw up some post-production stuff.
Yeah, actually, probably the easiest. It's a bit long, but easy. It's Bangkok Cinematographer
Yes,
think,
I think that's the one.
Phil-
We'll put it there. Don't worry.
Yeah, because my name is a bit complicated, so it's hard to make a note of it, but it's all connected, and my website is there too.
Yeah, so they can just contact you through your Instagram, send you
Yeah.
a DM. Ladies, watch out. Don't be sliding those DMs like that.
Actually, my girlfriend handling
that's
my
exactly.
Instagram.
Yeah, so if you're sliding in there, that's his girlfriend. You're getting in trouble.
Yeah.
All right. Well, am I on this camera? I can see myself. I didn't notice I was on the TV the whole time. Oh, okay. That's everything for us. This is the Fruiting Body Podcast. I'm your host, Brendan O'Neill. Today we are with Peter, and he shared us his whole story about cinematography in Thailand. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, turn that bell on, smash the subscribe, and yeah, that's it. I don't know how to end these things, so we're out. Yeah, we're